Hi, welcome everyone. William Solomon here with the ACMA. Welcome to the ACMA's Live Sciences Live Series, where we tackle issues relevant to life sciences professionals. Today, we're going to be discussing a really exciting topic, an important topic related to medical affairs and professional development. And more specifically, what capabilities make for an effective medical science liaison and an effective medical affairs professional. And I'm super excited today because I have with me two very experienced guests and professionals, executives in the pharmaceutical industry, really considered to be thought leaders in the industry within medical affairs. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming them. First, I have Dr. Luca Dezzani, who is a physician with extensive healthcare experience in clinical practice and in the pharma industry. He practiced as a physician in hematology, oncology, and internal medicine before joining Novartis, where he served in a variety of roles at the national, regional, and global levels in the EU and North America. Dr. Dezzani also continued his career serving in executive roles across medical affairs, clinical, and business development within AZ, AstraZeneca, and he's now the Vice President of U.S. Oncology and Medical Affairs at J&J. So welcome, Dr. Luca Dezzani. Pleasure to have you here on today's live event at the ACMA. Also with me, very happy to have Dr. Chelsea Aiudi, who earned her Doctor of Pharmacy degree at the University of Rhode Island. And she is a board certified medical affairs specialist, or BCMAS, for the last 5 years. And Chelsea started her career as a community pharmacist and quickly transitioned to a career in the industry. After 6 years of working in MedInfo, Dr. Aiudi became the Assistant Director of Global Disease and Product Training at Takeda Oncology. So, Chelsea, thanks again for taking the time and participating in today's live series. So welcome again to both of you. Very excited to have you on the panels. Let's jump right into it. Um, so medical affairs capabilities, medical affairs training, professional roadmap for medical affairs, again, is going to be the focus of today's topic. So Luca, I'll bring the first question to you. Based on your experiences, and you've had a variety of experiences at different companies, where do you see the gaps so far in capabilities among medical affairs and MSL professionals? What have you observed?
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as gaps, but it's a very rapidly evolving space. What I often say to people in my organization is that probably medical affairs has been one of the most rapidly evolving spaces in the pharmaceutical industry for sure, and probably even more broadly in the healthcare industry. So I wouldn't necessarily think of where we are at right now or think of capabilities as gaps, but just something that we all as medical affairs professionals need to be mindful of and keep learning, right? Keep um, uh, connecting with experts, definitely be part of a professional society. That's obviously a great thing to do, to stay connected with other thought leaders in the industry, and making sure that we are proficient on the new trends such as social media, Web3, metaverse, all the future and the trends we are seeing in medical affairs that will most likely reshape the way we do medical affairs in the next few years.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point to think about some of these other newer areas, from a digital and social media perspective that, really have impacted medical affairs and I think the industry as a whole. So Chelsea, let me ask the question a different way. What scope of capabilities do you think are required to be successful within medical affairs or as a medical science liaison?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I want to just kind of define what I think of as capabilities. So I think it goes beyond just knowledge, skills, or competency, and it goes into how you can take those knowledge and skills and really adapt into the future and use those skills to tackle things maybe you haven't before. So a few capabilities I think are important in medical affairs, and I've seen in my roles in both medical information and training, are strategic vision, collaborative leadership, especially because a lot of organizations, I think, are becoming less hierarchical, and you're collaborating with peers in other functional areas. And also learning agility. I think being in a training role, also learning agility is important. I think the BCMAS has been helpful in developing those and setting a foundation for developing some of those capabilities. I think for both strategic vision and collaborative leadership, we are learning from the program how other functional areas, both inside and outside of medical affairs, work together and can support each other. So it gives you that global vision of how things fit together. And then with learning agility, it's the art of learning how to learn. And I think that for medical affairs professionals who are pursuing this board certification, they're already, one step in the right direction with pursuing a culture of learning and taking those experiences either back to an organization or also to their job search. Since when I get asked about BCMS, it's usually from a lot of people who are trying to break into the industry. So I think it's a good way to start building those capabilities.
Absolutely, a lot of good points. Let's talk a little bit about the rapid transformation of medical affairs that Luca, you alluded to. So given how quickly things are changing within the industry and specifically within medical affairs, let's talk a little bit about leaders and how leaders could proactively kind of think about ways to develop the skills and capabilities of their teams. We talk to a lot of medical affairs leaders at the ACMA all the time. And one of the things that we hear consistently is they want to invest in their people. They want to help those individuals grow and develop and provide for them a continuous roadmap for success. Tell us a little bit about what you think from your perspective are effective ways to do that.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, you need to think of where we were even just a couple of years ago and where we are heading towards in terms of medical affairs. I tend to think of medical affairs, historically, if you think of like medical affairs 1.0, that was all about legs on the ground, building relationships, making sure that you had trusted partnerships with HCPs and key stakeholders in the healthcare space, right? That's what historically medical affairs was all about. I think where we are now, it's more of a probably like medical affairs 2.0, where you have other elements like social media. We mentioned that earlier, like becoming proficient in social listening. The other big component is of medical affairs 2.0 is big data, right? So becoming proficient in understanding what the different data sets available out there are, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each one of them, and also understanding some basics in when it comes to analyzing data and making sense of data. And not that, again, medical affairs professionals need to be programmers or need to be the data analysts or experts themselves. But again, it's important that medical affairs professionals do have an understanding of what data and analytics is all about, and how you can work with that technology. Looking forward, right? Looking ahead, I'm really thinking leaders will have an even bigger challenge, right? Because what we have embraced over the last couple of years, probably accelerated by COVID and pandemic, to understand, has been a digital transformation that, quite frankly, I think it's here to stay. Quite frankly, I think 50% of the workforce when it comes to HCPs are now millennials, and Gen Zers are now entering the workforce as we speak. These people are digital natives and they think in a different way. They think of content, they think of medical education in a completely different way. They love TikTok, which is a very interesting platform we can speak about for hours and hours, right? So they are not really used to choosing contents. They are very used to algorithm choosing contents for them. So again, these are all very interesting dynamics that any medical affairs professional should be aware of. Some of these things will become part of the skill set that it's truly going to be required of a medical affairs professional to be successful. Some others will probably die, and there's not going to be any real use case or application for them. But I still think, being curious and the learning agility we already mentioned, as well as like emotional intelligence, I think are very good things any medical affairs professionals need to have.
Sure. Today's medical affairs teams, of course, we know in a lot of the companies, especially the larger companies, are global, right? They're global medical affairs teams. And we know that medical affairs governance is critical, right, to ensuring that you have a successful medical affairs organization, having clear governance in place. Tell me a little bit about, your perspective, Chelsea, get your kind of your take on it, especially because you work within training. How do you establish that sense of homogeneity when it comes to skill setting, right, and establishing uniformity? And I know a lot of people, a lot of organizations that we work with, that's part of the reason why they'll implement board certifications, because they like to have this level set concept across their global medical affairs teams. Because one of the things about the BCMAS program is that it actually has different versions for different parts of the world. So if you're in Europe, you might enroll in one version versus you're in the US, another version, given the different regulatory and compliance dynamics that differ from region to region. What do you guys do? Let's say, doesn't have to be specifically at your company, but in general, with your experience, to think about how you level set your organizations, that everyone comes in, and they're functioning at some kind of minimum standardized level of competency.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think that globalization is often a hot topic when I go to a lot of industry conferences. And so I've worked in global roles in both medical information and in my current role in training. And I think one thing that I kind of try to stay humble is that I can't necessarily know or anticipate all of the needs in some of these global countries that I serve. And so it requires a lot of collaboration and understanding for the medical affairs leaders within these local countries or local regions. So specifically for a training role, we have a model where we train the trainer. So we have people that are experts and heads of all of these local countries, and we're able to liaise with them as a first contact, and then they can disseminate their own training to their countries based on contextualizing it for their business needs, for product launches happening on different timelines in their countries. So I think when we're talking about globalization, I think something that is important to know is that it's not a one size fits all. Even if we want to try as much as possible to make our global colleagues on the same level, in certain areas it might not be the time that they need to be proficient on this sort of data compared to a neighboring country that's ready to launch. So I think for specific rubrics or things like that we use, we ensure that they're trained on data, but then also from the capability side and talking about soft skills and professional skills, that's also an element that we offer from our training department to make sure that those are being transferred, and that we're making sure that our global colleagues are proficient at presentation facilitation skills, which is something that I know the BCMAS program touches on too, with a module on that, which I think is great because it's important and can be something that maybe is synonymous with sales, but it's very important from a medical affairs perspective that we're able to, discuss and talk with data in an engaging way.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. Thinking about one of the emerging trends and some of the changes that are happening in medicine in general, right? We know that there has been a rapid evolution when it comes to pharmacogenomics and personalized medicine. Luca touched on the issues of big data. And this all obviously impacts medical affairs professionals, MSL professionals, in terms of their capabilities. What is your take, Luca, on the importance, for example, of understanding the other kind of areas within life sciences outside of maybe traditional pharma and biotech, like medical devices and diagnostics? And I ask that question because as I'm looking here in some of the comments, we're getting some questions about the role of medical and devices and diagnostics. And as especially as products have become more sophisticated, now we're not a lot of times only dealing with let's say a traditional chemical product, or now it could be a biologic, could be a biosimilar, it could be an application, right? There's software, and all those play a role in terms of treatment. What's kind of your take on the importance of that, understanding these other kind of ancillary industries, devices, diagnostics, etc.?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question, and obviously it's hard to predict what's going to happen, but I can certainly see moving forward lines blurring a little bit when it comes to the definition of a pharmaceutical product as opposed to a medical device, as opposed to diagnostics, as opposed to a digital therapeutics, right? So these are all probably separate entities right now, and we have a very kind of clear understanding of what each one of them is, at least today. But I do anticipate things becoming, again, a bit more fuzzy in terms of the boundaries between the definitions of each one of them. I think what you mentioned in terms of the digital diagnostics and apps and digital therapeutics as well, that's a great example, right? It's not necessarily a device, it's not necessarily a chemical component, it is not a diagnostic per se. So I think what we're going to be seeing is definitely a bit more overlaps, I would say, between these different categories. What's certain to me though is, again, if you are in medical affairs, you may really want to stay up to date on some of these trends, right? And again, it's there is no need for anybody in medical affairs to become an expert in blockchains or become an expert or like in programming or coding. I mean, that's not the intent. But again, I do think any medical affairs professional should at least understand some of these technologies, educate ourselves on some of these technologies, and maybe work with the experts to move the needle for patients, right? That's the ultimate goal, regardless of the particular technology or the particular innovation.
Thank you, Luca. Chelsea, we've got a few questions about board certification in medical affairs, and people are interested in kind of your perspective. One of the questions is related to the fact of how board certification may have helped you in your career. So you were board certified in medical affairs. Maybe if you can kind of give us some concrete examples of how has it helped you in terms of your knowledge, in terms of what you do day to day when it comes to training at Takeda or elsewhere. If you can comment on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So with board certification, I've been board certified for about 5 years. I'd been a few years in the industry when I decided to pursue it. I think it was really my first step and my commitment to myself to keep developing myself as a professional, a medical affairs professional, as a leader. And so the main impetus for pursuing board certification for me was a lot of pharmacists, they enter the industry and do a fellowship where they kind of get a crash course on what industry is. And since I entered industry from a community pharmacy position, I felt like I didn't really understand how all of the different departments, both inside and outside of medical affairs, fit together and how they were going to impact me and my role at that time in medical information. So I pursued the board certification, which I think really helped give me a foundational knowledge on different subfunctions and functional areas within medical affairs. And so since board certification, I've been at a few different companies since then. So I've been through many interviews, and I do mention BCMAS at every interview. And I think that it's looked upon very positively, even if it's not from someone who necessarily is familiar with the board certification. I'm able to explain it. I think it shows a commitment to learning. It shows self-motivation that I pursued that for myself, and while still working a full-time job. And so now that I switched my functional area, so I was in medical information, and now I'm in disease and product training and medical training. And so I think that that foundational knowledge and that global view of medical affairs that I've been talking about, I had that idea, and now I am executing on that in real life because I am myself in a more global role. I have experience in 2 different facets of medical affairs at this point. So I think, it helped with that lateral career move for myself and pursuing something that I had no experience in, but I felt like I had the capabilities to, learn how to do a new role and succeed in a new role that I wasn't familiar with.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. One of the questions that came in was related to training in a pharmaceutical company, and specifically thinking about the innovative ways to train folks. So, we're talking obviously about a professional roadmap and continuous development in medical affairs. What have you seen? This can go to either Luca or Chelsea, are ways that you've seen people implement innovative techniques or methods to help train folks. And this could be across any of the functional skills that we've talked about. What have you seen?
Yeah, so I think both Luca and myself, and the theme of this has been digital innovation, social media. I think all of that stuff is carrying through into training, and so especially being in a virtual environment with COVID over the last couple of years, we've had to be really innovative in how we engage people with training since we're not doing things face to face. And so we've done things such as gamification to have games to help enhance learning and retention. We've done virtual workshops that include like escape rooms and engaging things that are bringing participants in and keeping them through a computer still engaged in learning. And then I think mobile learning is something as well. So we have different retention strategies that can email questions. And so that if you're on the move, especially from a field medical professionals perspective, when they don't have much time, they can just go on their mobile phone and see those questions, look at flashcards. So they're being able to see training in different formats that way too.
Sure. All great points.
Maybe I can add just one point from a slightly different perspective, because when I think, especially when it comes to upskilling medical affairs organizations on things like technology, innovation, social media, these kind of things. Of course, there is like the training, the formal training component, but then there is another component that I think is probably as important as formal training, which is like learnings from peers, right? Learning from other team members who may be 1 or 2 steps ahead, and they may already have more experience in that particular space. So, from my standpoint, is very important to also attract talents in medical affairs, maybe from other companies or even other industries, right? That have that skill set, that understand technology and understand, how the intersection of technology and healthcare works, so that they can also contribute to that peer-to-peer training or upskilling that is happening organically within the organization.
Yeah, Luca, I think that's a great point. Such an important point. And I think this goes to, one of the things that we were talking about earlier, which is around coaching, but that one-to-one peer mentorship, I think is so important because, being able to relay those experiences to folks that maybe have less experience or are newer to the industry can really go a long way in helping them to further their career and figure out how to navigate certain things when they come into contact with those specific situations. So we're in 2022. If I was to tell you, you have your crystal ball and it's 2032, we're 10 years from now, what would you say? Just give me 3 characteristics of a medical affairs MSL professional, top 3 skills that are a must-have in 2032? Again, kind of think about your crystal ball there, think into the future. The three top things that every medical affairs MSL professional needs to have to be competitive in the market, to be successful.
Yeah, I can give it a shot. So you remember I mentioned the medical affairs 1.0 and where we are now, which is to me what I consider medical affairs 2.0. If I think of medical affairs 3, right? If I think of the next wave of innovation in medical affairs, I can think of three things to your point, right? Number one is transparency. I think we are gonna become less of a content creator, less of like slides and PowerPoints and all of that stuff, but we will become more content curators, right? So we're gonna be addressing HCP's questions not by coming up with our own content. We're going to be pulling together contents from reputable sources and address that question by curating contents as opposed to creating content. So transparency is number one. Number two is communities. Right now, medical affairs is very much about partnership with investigators, with institutions, and I think we're going to be and the future is going to be more about building communities that are, it's not us and them, it's not me and you, but it's us in terms of we share the same goals, we share the same agenda in terms of improving outcomes for patients with diabetes. The third theme, I think, is going to be around decentralization. And this is the whole point about the applications of blockchains in healthcare. It's about making sure that patients own their own data, and we use their data that they own to do research so that they can express their consent to any analysis we do. And we are going to really take real world evidence to the next level, really by leveraging blockchain technology. So these are the three themes I can think of for the future of medical affairs.
I love that, Luca. I love that. Thank you. I thought that was very insightful. Chelsea, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Luca said really resonated to what I'm thinking for the future of medical affairs. I do think digital innovation is going to continue to be a theme. I think we're only just getting started with that. I think that the pandemic in particular, even as things are going back to more normal, a lot of companies are continuing to be hybrid. We found we were very successful with how we were able to execute still over the past 2 years. So I think as we enter the next phase of how the world is functioning, I think change management and just really being able to figure out as we go how to adapt to different changes of how fields medical are working, how we're training, how we're working globally, if we're having hybrid congresses still, or people going back into person. I think that'll be something that'll be interesting to see in the future.
And that brings me to my final point around COVID and kind of the post-COVID world. I know we were talking right before we went live on the broadcast that companies are still hybrid to some degree. I would imagine that kind of adds another layer potentially of an obstacle when it comes to professional development for folks, because part of being able to have professional development effectively is having those, to Luca's point, peer-to-peer interactions, face-to-face interactions. So I do think there's a newer element to that can make things difficult. At the same time, I think the Gen Zers, the millennials, they're used to a lot of virtual interactions. And so for them, it may not be as much of a challenge. I think for medical affairs professionals, the only thing I would add is I think in the future, virtual engagement in general, whether it's internal, external, whether it's with your physicians, regulatory, it doesn't really matter. I think being able to navigate that effectively and also having digital tools and technology in place with clear governance and rules on how to utilize them. Because digital tools are great, but if they're not utilized effectively or compliantly, they can actually present a risk to companies. And I've seen that happen quite often with some companies. So I think this is something that's going to be really key in the years to come. Well, we're right up at the end of time. I want to thank Dr. Luca Dezzani, Dr. Chelsea Aiudi for participating in today's live event series. I want to thank everybody for joining as well, all your comments and questions. This clip is going to be live both on LinkedIn and we'll also post it live on the ACMA YouTube page. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.